So first of all, Angela, how are you holding up during this quarantine?
All things considered, I'm fine. Thank you for asking. But I will say that maybe like everyone on this call, it's like there are not only good days and bad days. Like there are good hours and bad hours. But all things considered, I'm definitely very fortunate. But if you're not stressed during this time, then you're not human.
Sure. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about setting goals and following through. Why is this topic important to you personally?
I'm somebody who has, as a psychologist, I've specialized in really goal-directed behavior. Like that would probably be the most accurate phrase to, that's what I study. And when you ask the question, like, why don't people automatically, consistently, and always do what they really want to do? Like that's the mystery that I, try to understand. And I do think that goal setting and making plans, um, these are like essential skills, and they're not automatic. I don't think we're like, I don't think anybody's born knowing how to do it, and very few people have learned how to do it optimally.
Hmm. So given the current circumstances, why is this topic especially important to all of us right now?
You know, our founding fathers in the United States talked about the pursuit of happiness, and I have during this crisis realized that there's something equally true, which is the happiness of pursuit, the happiness of goal pursuit. I think all of us are happier when we are given a goal, or given ourselves, like we have a goal and we're pursuing it. There's happiness in pursuing goals. And I think um, for many of us, like the disruption in our routines, which you talked about at the last lunch and learn, and also just the either having too many goals and then not being able to make progress on them, like urgent stressful things, or not having a goal, like these are things which are exacerbating our unease. And if I think about, I said to you, like there's good days and bad days, there's good hours and bad hours. Actually, the moments in my day that are the best for me are when I am doing something and I'm making progress on it. So I think it's good advice at any time, but maybe especially now.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important reminder that setting these goals for ourselves is not a sort of like punishment or, forcing ourselves to do something, that it actually is in itself very intrinsically rewarding when we're able to set them and meet them.
Exactly.
So, Angela, what is one strategy related to goal setting that you recommend?
So here I'm going to be very, very upfront and say this is not my intellectual contribution. I am going to summarize the research of Gabrielle Ettingen and Peter Gollwitzer at New York University at NYU. And they have spent their entire lives as scientists studying goal setting and planning. And here's what they would recommend if they were on this lunch and learn. Um, the first part of, they have a 4-letter acronym, WHOOP. So the first part of this is the wish, and the second part is thinking about the outcome, that like if your wish came true. I mean, they say wish, but it could also be considered a goal. So the acronym is WOOP: wish, outcome, obstacle. That's the third part, right? What's the obstacle that stands in the way of this wish coming true? And then P is plan. So wish, outcome, obstacle, plan. And you could think of it as goal, outcome, obstacle, plan, but then it would be goop. And I think anyway, they chose whoop over goop, but it's really the same thing. So the first part is you make a wish or you set a goal, right? And the recommendation here is to be specific and to be feasible, right? I think with this group in particular, I don't have to remind us to also, it has to be challenging. Like you don't want to set a goal to like breathe or to, do things that you just are already doing. But I think with this group, you want to emphasize equally that it should be feasible. In other words, don't set goals that are too ambitious, especially now when our resources are really being stretched. So For example, I had a wish to write a gratitude letter to my PhD advisor, and I made it very specific. I was like, I'm going to write a gratitude letter, and I'm going to do it before Friday at 11 o'clock, which is when I had scheduled to talk to him. So that would be a goal or a wish. Now, what's the outcome? So in this 4-step series, the outcome is like imagining what it will be like when I read Marty Seligman, my gratitude letter. And I did actually take a moment before I had written the letter. I was like, okay, my wish is to write Marty a gratitude letter by, 11 o'clock on Friday. And the outcome is like, I have not properly thanked my advisor, and I've known him for nearly 2 decades. So now's the time. And then the third stage of this, the second O, so WOOP, the second O is the obstacle. Like, what is the obstacle that stands in the way? And I thought to myself, like, why haven't I written a gratitude letter to my advisor? I'm even somebody who has studied the gratitude letter as an exercise. Like, I've never written one. This is ridiculous. Am I just a deeply ungrateful person? And I realized, like, I had anxiety about, like, I didn't want to write a terrible gratitude letter. There was such a, I don't know, there was like a weight on me, kind of like, well, if you're going to write Marty a gratitude letter, it's going to be a beautiful gratitude letter, it's going to be the perfect gratitude letter. And then I needed to get to the fourth stage. So the final stage of WHOOP is P, make a plan. So understanding the obstacle that stands in the way, you make a plan to avoid or overcome the obstacle. And I made a plan, which is like, if I feel like this letter needs to be perfect, then I will remind myself that any letter is better than no letter. And that was my plan. And I did feel this, like I was starting to write it, and then I stopped, and then I was like, okay, wait, hold on. Any letter is better than no letter. And I'm happy to report to you, Taylor, that I finished my gratitude letter, which is here, and I read it to him, and I recorded it on my phone.
And what was his reaction?
Tears, and me too. But I got to like almost the last sentence before I, cried.
I'm glad it was rewarding for you.
Yeah.
So Angela, as a psychologist, can you just tell us a little bit about why this process is effective?
When we have intentions like, oh gosh, I want to do 10,000 steps, like, which by the way, when we all transitioned into this crazy situation we're in, I remember saying out loud to myself, like, I'm going to walk every day. I'm going to get 10,000 steps. And then, the first day passed, and like, I looked at my phone, it was like 200 steps. And then it was like the second day passed, and I was like, whoa, what's going on? Why is there a gap between our intentions and our actions? I think it's because many of us, either sort of fumble at the first stage, right? Like, we create infeasible goals. That wasn't really the problem with 10,000 steps. I think that's actually a feasible goal. Or we could fumble at subsequent stages. Like, sometimes you don't take a moment to just ask yourself, like, why do I have this goal? With the steps, I could have said, like, well, what outcome am I looking for? And it's like, you know what? My whole day is going to go better if I get some physical exercise. Like, I'm going to sleep better. My family's going to be grateful because I won't be so cranky. So I kind of skipped that step. And the most important thing I skipped, I think, was like really understanding the obstacle that stood in the way, and then making a plan. So what this WHOOP technique allows you to do is bridge the gap between our intentions and our actions.
So you spoke to many of the benefits of using WHOOP, and you also implicitly kind of mentioned some of the common pitfalls of when people use WHOOP, like perhaps setting a goal that itself is not feasible. What are some other common pitfalls that you see when people try to take this up?
I've never met an educator who hasn't at some point sat down with a student and tried to set goals and maybe even make plans. And I did that as a teacher. But here was the thing that I screwed up a lot as a teacher. And also I think we screw up as individuals. Like, you set a goal, maybe you go through some version of WHOOP, but anyway, you make some kind of plan, and then the plan doesn't work. And then you just give up. You're like, oh, okay. Just like, I'm going to clean my desk every day. I mean, I remember working with a student, like that was that was the plan. I was like, I want to be tidier. Like, I'm going to clean my desk every day. And then like, it didn't work. Like, the desk was not cleaned every day. And then the usual response is just to give up. But there's really something important here. In the research on goal setting and planning, there is a stage that comes after you make the plan and you give it a try, which is called the evaluation stage. And the key is that you have to just look at what happened, and if it worked, great. 9 times out of 10 it's not going to work, and then you have to make a different plan. Like, oh, okay, I thought I was going to clean my desk every day, like right after lunch, like that didn't work, I kept forgetting. Okay, I'm going to do it first thing in the morning. I'm going to put a post-it on my desk that says like clean me, right? Maybe that won't work. Okay, now I need a buddy who like keeps me accountable, like, okay, I'll clean your desk, you clean mine. I mean, the thing about goal setting and planning is that you shouldn't have the expectation that your plan is going to work. 9 times out of 10 it's not, and then you, being the clever and awesome human being you are going to like make another plan. I think that's maybe as important as the first steps, setting the goal, etc.
Right. So I think it was you who I've heard use the extended metaphor, the extended acronym WHOOPER. So whoop plus evaluate and repeat.
Exactly, Whooper. I don't know if it's going to go viral, but I kind of like it. Whooper.
So I have one more question for you, and then we'll turn to questions from the audience. But Angela, for those of us who are ready to start using Whoop in our own lives, what are our next steps?
So Gabrielle Engine and Peter Goldwitzer have lots of materials, and especially for educators, they collaborated with my nonprofit Character Lab. And I know you think you're putting in the chat box, or maybe you can do that now, but there is a downloadable PDF, and Gabrielle made a video, and I think it's all very age general, so you can watch it and follow along if you're like me, nearly 50, but you could also do it, I think, even if you're like nearly 10. So it's a pretty straightforward technique, and I think its simplicity is why it's so helpful.
And I see that one of our moderators just entered a resource that your Character Lab created into our group chat box. So participants, that's a wonderful resource. We'd love to direct you there and help. Hopefully that's a useful guide through this process as well. So Angela, I'm going to turn to questions from our participants.
Great.
One question that's popped up is, can you use Whoop for all kinds of goals or just specific kinds of goals?
I really think it works for the most abstract, general, like 20-year kind of goals. It can work for 24-hour goals too. And in fact, when Gabrielle Ettingen runs Whoop workshops, she always starts people with what she calls a 24-hour wish. Like, what is something that you wish you would do in the next 24 hours? And then she would like, what's the best outcome of that? What's the best, what's the obstacle? Okay, what's your plan? And I've used it for 20-year goals, but also for 24-hour goals myself.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have another comment. One of our participants writes, sometimes we feel very motivated to attend to a goal, but sometimes emotion-wise, we just feel super demotivated and we don't know the reason. How do we make sure that we can still get closer to the goal in this situation?
Empathy is a great thing to have right now, not only for other people though, but even for ourselves. And who we are in this moment is, not necessarily our future self, our past self. Anyway, having a little compassion for the people we are, and just knowing that motivation is going to ebb and flow, energy is going to ebb and flow. Frankly, I think these days optimism ebbs and flows, right? Some days I wake up and I'm like a complete optimist, and then I like, a few bad things happen and my pessimistic self comes out. And I think having a little bit of empathy or compassion for myself and being like, okay, that's totally understandable. So I do think motivation to achieve our goals is naturally going to ebb and flow, and maybe now more than ever. What I think I would just press on a little bit, this is my recommendation, is, most of us are actually pretty good at understanding why we feel the way we do if we just take a moment and ask. So if you just ask yourself like, why don't I feel like writing this gratitude letter? Or like, why didn't I take 10,000 steps? You don't really need an expert to tell you. Like, if you just take a moment, you realize like, oh, it's anxiety. Or with my 10,000 steps, I just forgot. Like, it was never scheduled. And, so it can be something deep. It can be something a little less deep. But if you just ask yourself, I think 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to understand. And then you can accept that. And then maybe you can make a plan around that.
Wonderful. And I love that you're bringing up the theme of compassion. That's something that came up yesterday in our conversation. Dr. Ravitch encouraged us to just simply be curious about what we're feeling and what we're experiencing and what we're doing right now, and to try to reserve that judgment, just like we would for a friend, and show that to ourselves as well. So thank you for reminding us.
It's a good lesson. I don't think any of us need secondary stress right now. We have enough primary stress, but don't feel bad about being stressed. Or, I know some of my friends were like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't feel stressed because when I see what's happening in Italy or India, like it's so much worse." But and I think you know, don't feel you know don't feel stressed about being stressed. It's like whatever you're feeling, there's a reason, and it's okay to feel that way. And it's also okay to feel especially compassionate for those who are even less fortunate. But yeah, so I think that's good advice that I will echo that advice.
Um, we have a participant writing, I heard the phrase that you cannot always be motivated, but you can be disciplined. I would love to hear this explained through Dr. Duckworth's perspective.
Some psychologists, including me, will make a distinction between motivation and volition. And I know this question is about discipline, but I think that's the distinction: motivation and volition. What's the difference? Motivation is what you want, right? Like, I want to take 10,000 steps. I want to properly thank my mentor. I want to sleep better tonight. Um, I think that is usefully distinguished from volition. Volition is actually effectively taking action on those goals. And sometimes motivation and volition just go together, right? Like, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat these chicken nuggets, like, ta-da, like no volitional problem. But other things like getting the exercise or writing that letter or getting work done, or even for me in some ways sleeping, like there are volitional obstacles. And that is where we need things like goal setting and planning techniques. But the basic distinction is really important. So you can understand now, maybe more even your students. Like my research, there are no students who don't want to succeed in school. Like they all want to be successful in school. It's not a lack of motivation. Sometimes it's sometimes they have volitional skills that they haven't yet learned. And so they're, having a problem bridging that intention to do well in school and go to college and their actions. And so that's where I think, a little compassion and a little skill building, both for our students and ourselves, really helps.
Right. This connects to another question that we have, which is, what plan would you recommend for anxiety or the fear of getting started on our goals? Right? Because even sitting down at the table and starting the whoop or the whooper itself can be a scary act and require a lot of courage. Do you have any thoughts about that?
When Gabrielle does this exercise, when she does this workshop, when she gets to the O of for obstacle, like, most people, by the way, don't have, but most people actually like thinking about like, what is a wish, especially if you phrase it as a wish. Like, do you have any wishes? Like, what do you wish the next 24 hours would go? Like, what do you wish would happen in the spring semester? Most people actually find that really a positive experience, and then you get to imagine the outcome. You're like, how will that make you feel? And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel so great. So actually it's not the first two letters in whoop that really get to anxiety. When she gets to the third letter, the second O, obstacle, she always says it like this: what is it in you? What is it in you that's holding you back? And I remember when I first learned whoop, she did this, she did it to me, and she was like, Angela, what is it in you? What holds you back? And I was like, I don't know, maybe I don't have time. And really, I think often it is anxiety. And she actually kept probing until I realized that for the whoop that we were doing, like there was actually an undercurrent of my own insecurity and anxiety and kind of like not wanting to deal with certain possibilities. So I think that when you get to that stage of whoop and you have this like freezing up and this tension, maybe one thing to understand is like it's totally normal. And if you could just channel your inner Gabrielle Ettingen and just keep asking the way she kept asking me, like, but what is it really? And I felt like it was a great release to just name it out loud and just to say, what my insecurity was. And then it was like, my shoulders relaxed, and then I could really go forward and make a plan. And you're exactly right, Taylor. So many of us don't get started because we're sort of avoiding that. And hopefully Whoop, especially with its positive W and its positive O for outcome, are a nice on-ramp onto that.
Yeah, exactly. So you can either train yourself to ask yourself those questions, or perhaps train your roommate to channel Gabrielle and sit down with you and be a thought partner with you in this process.
Absolutely. In fact, I recommend this as an amazing parent share bonding thing. If you could do it for classes, like maybe when you give an assignment, just even because this is not super emotional, but like if you say like, okay, everybody, I really want you to like read this chapter before I think actually saying like, okay, what's the wish to read the chapter? Like, what's the best outcome that would happen if you read this chapter? And by the way, if as an instructor you haven't communicated that, like, why the heck are we reading this chapter? Like, it'll highlight that you need to do that. And then the obstacle, if students in your class are like pair off, you're like, oh, what do you think the obstacle is going to be for you? And like not doing the assignment this week. And then to come up with your plans and to just basically show each other your plans. I found it's really fun. It's kind of intimate, but it's not like group therapy intimate. It's really, really a nice activity. I recommend it for, those of us who are doing remote learning this semester.
Well, Angela, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights with us. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Taylor, I adore you. So now I want to say, like, you're amazing. I love teaching with you, and thank you for having me here. I think this is a great series.
Thank you so much.